Is something wrong? It feels like you two aren't getting along all of a sudden.
Nothing.
When I asked my husband, Michael, out of concern, he turned away. But I couldn't trust that answer. Because there's no way nothing's wrong. There must be some kind of tension between Michael and my daughter-in-law, Julia. What could they be hiding? Now that our son, Luke, has passed away, what could have happened between them? Luke was family-minded, always caring deeply about both Michael and Julia. I felt like it was my duty to protect the family that Luke cherished so much. But at the time, I never imagined that my feelings would lead to such consequences. My name is Susan Turner, a housewife in my 60s. I live with my husband Michael and our son's family. My son Luke has always been a bit frail, and every time he got sick as a child, I was the one who took care of him. Luke married a woman named Julia and started a family. However, Luke's frail health didn't improve much, so I thought it would be best for him if I was nearby in case anything happened. That's why I invited Luke and his wife to move in with us, and the four of us began living together. But to be honest, my relationship with Julia didn't go well. She always seemed to treat me as the enemy. Julia wasn't very proactive about helping with housework. Most of the chores were left to me, and even when she had free time, she never offered to help, preferring to relax in her room instead. Frustrated by this, I often found myself scolding her. "Julia, you're a housewife too, so do your part." When I confronted her about her laziness, she would look at me with a face that seemed to say, "Here we go again," and let out a huge sigh.
Susan, this feels like you're just picking on me. I'm dealing with a lot too. Living with you and Michael is really stressful, you know? Do you get that?
I understand, but that's not the point. We agreed on living together, didn't we? I asked you several times if you were okay with it before you moved in. You said yes, didn't you? Knowing that living together might make Julia feel uncomfortable, I had repeatedly checked with her to ensure she was fine with it. So it was an arrangement we all agreed to. But now she was turning the tables, saying things like, "Living together is too stressful, and it's hard being around you, Susan. It didn't sit right with me." If she didn't like the idea, she should have said so from the start. It was incredibly unfair of her to change her story and try to escape by saying, "I never wanted to do it in the first place, the moment things didn't go her way." I couldn't accept Julia's behavior, and over time, every little thing she did began to stand out, adding more and more to my stress. The bigger my frustration grew, the worse my attitude toward her became, and my words grew harsher. Eventually, Julia seemed to want nothing to do with me and would avoid even acknowledging me whenever we passed each other. And then a terrible tragedy struck. Luke collapsed at work. Thanks to his coworkers' quick actions, Luke was rushed to the hospital and admitted. When I heard the news, I rushed to the hospital, desperate to see him. The doctor, whom I'd met many times before, told me that Luke's condition was worse than I'd imagined. When I went into the hospital room, Luke was hooked up to all kinds of tubes. One look at him, and I could tell his condition wasn't good. Thankfully, he was conscious, but his voice was weak from the severity of his illness.
Mom.
When Luke saw me, he called out to me in a pained voice. Hearing that tone broke my heart. If I could take his place, I would. There was no reason for Luke to suffer like this. That thought kept swirling in my mind, making it hard for me to bear. From that day on, I visited Luke at the hospital every day. When Luke was feeling better, he would eat the fruit I brought him. But when he was feeling worse, he couldn't eat anything, and he was getting weaker by the day. However, Julia never once went to visit Luke in the hospital.
I'm heading out now.
Not only that, but she would dress up in flashy outfits and go out to have fun. Seeing Julia so unconcerned about Luke's condition made me furious, and I spoke to her sharply. "Julia, shouldn't you visit Luke in the hospital at least once?" Julia frowned.
Luke collapsed out of nowhere, and I'm hurting too. How can you not see that? You're so insensitive, Susan.
Stop turning away from reality. Luke is still suffering from his illness. As his wife, shouldn't you be there to support him? He said he's lonely because you haven't visited him. I couldn't hold back anymore, so I scolded her harshly. Julia just sighed dramatically.
Susan, stop nagging me. Just because Luke's in this condition doesn't mean you can take out your anger on me. That's not fair.
With that, she left the house. I never intended to take out my anger on her. I just wanted her to act like a decent person, like a wife, and do what's right. But my feelings never got through to Julia. And after a long battle with his illness, Luke passed away. He was only in his 40s, and his short life was over. It was so heartbreaking, so painful, that even during the funeral, I was barely conscious and couldn't stop crying. Luke was such a kind-hearted person, loved by many. During the funeral, there were countless people crying, mourning the loss of someone so special. He was my precious only son, a loving presence no one can replace. Losing him left a huge hole in my heart, but we still had things to deal with. We had to sit down with a lawyer to discuss things with Michael and Julia. The topic was Luke's assets. During his life, Luke had made a fortune in the stock market, amassing a wealth of $10 million. I had no idea how Luke's assets would be divided, even though I was his mother. But it seemed that Luke had left a will with his lawyer during his illness. According to the lawyer, Luke's $10 million estate was to be divided equally between Michael and me. It was a small gesture of gratitude for our unwavering support during his illness.
Just Susan and Michael. What about me?
Julia asked, clearly dissatisfied. The lawyer nodded in confirmation.
That's ridiculous.
Julia shouted in anger, but Michael managed to calm her down, and the situation was resolved peacefully. Afterward, as we started the process of helping Julia move, I began to feel something was off. The atmosphere between Julia and Michael was tense. They had always been close, even going out for meals together on occasion. Luke never seemed to mind, so I never brought it up, but the vibe between them now was just too strange. Did something happen? It feels like you two suddenly aren't getting along. I felt uneasy, so I decided to ask Michael.
Nothing.
Michael shook his head. But it was obvious that something was going on, and I couldn't stop wondering what it was. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to take action. After investigating, I discovered the truth. Michael and Julia were in the wrong. They weren't just father-in-law and daughter-in-law. What they did, betraying Luke and me, is something I can never forgive. So, I called them both into the living room, telling them I had something to discuss.
What's this about?
I want you to take a look at this. I said that and showed them the screen of my phone. Michael and Julia looked puzzled. but when they saw the video, they both gasped. The footage showed the living room. Michael and Julia entered the frame, and they were having a tense conversation.
Julia, come on. Don't be mad. I never expected Luke to leave a will like that.
Julia ignored Michael's words. Growing impatient, Michael continued.
Julia, I can't do this without you. I'll give you part of the inheritance later. I'll divorce Susan, and then will you marry me?
At that, Julia, who had been cold until then, smiled and hugged Michael.
I knew you'd understand, Michael. Once you divorce Susan, we'll be happy together.
After Julia said that, the two walked out of the camera frame. This video was clear evidence that the two of them were having an affair. Neither I nor Luke had ever imagined that Michael and Julia would be involved in something like this. Something beyond anger was welling up inside me as I thought of how these two had betrayed us. Without knowing anything, Luke entrusted his inheritance to Michael. This is the result of trusting Michael as a reliable father. There's no way Luke could rest in peace knowing this. Do you really think you can get away with this? You both know there will be consequences, right? When I asked that, their faces turned pale. Julia stepped forward to defend herself.
Susan, this video is a mistake or something.
A mistake? That's impossible. This footage came from a camera I set up myself. There was no way it could have captured something by mistake. I looked over at Michael, and he averted his eyes awkwardly. His refusal to face the truth only added to my frustration. I couldn't take it anymore, and I decided it was time to begin my act of revenge.
It's not true. I never had an affair. Michael came to me.
Julia tried to pin the blame on Michael. Hearing that, Michael's face flushed red, and he blurted out,
That's not true. Julia came on to me. I knew it was wrong to get involved with my son's wife, but she kept coming at me, so I had no choice.
What?
At that, Julia yelled and grabbed Michael by his collar. Her face was contorted with rage.
What do you mean you had no choice? You're the one who made the move, promising we could keep it a secret.
Stop accusing me. Susan, you have to believe me. I never meant for any of this to happen.
Susan, I'm telling the truth. Please believe me.
The two of them grabbed each other's collars, hurling insults and trying to win my favor. Their behavior was so disgusting that I couldn't help but sigh. I had no intention of siding with either of them. It didn't matter who initiated the affair. What was clear was that they had both betrayed Luke and me. They both deserved to be punished. They had pretended nothing was wrong while betraying us. Luke had trusted them both, especially Michael, giving him half of his $10 million inheritance. That money was a token of Luke's appreciation for Michael. Even after receiving Luke's inheritance, Michael didn't end his relationship with Julia. He was even planning to divorce me so he could be with her, and I was furious. But I couldn't help but feel that Julia, who was excited and thrilled by Michael's words, was equally guilty. Watching Michael and Julia blame each other, desperately trying to avoid punishment and protect themselves, was truly disgusting. How could I have ever considered these people my family? I was even disgusted with myself for my foolishness. But despite how I felt, the two of them continued to argue. Watching them pull each other down was truly ridiculous.
Michael, weren't you going to take my side? You said you'd divorce Susan and be with me. Did you forget what you promised?
Julia, unable to hold back her frustration, yelled at Michael. Michael, clearly flustered by her words, stammered and snapped back at Julia.
Stop it. I'm not the bad guy here. It's your fault. Stop blaming me.
Michael's shout echoed through the living room. I was so shocked by the volume that I froze in place. But Julia's face turned red, and she fired back at him.
I'm not at fault. You're the one to blame, Michael. Stop making excuses.
With that, Julia collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. Her constant claim that she wasn't at fault showed just how desperate she was. But Michael didn't hold back, continuing to hurl cruel words at her.
You tramp. Playing with people's emotions and then acting like a victim? That's unforgivable.
His words were harsh, far too cold to be said to anyone. If someone had said those words to me, I wouldn't have been able to recover. But Julia didn't back down. Instead, she screamed at Michael, her face turning an even deeper shade of red.
How dare you talk to me like that? You enjoyed it too. Who's the real victim here?
What did you just say?
With those words, they glared at each other. The tension in the air was so thick, it felt like a fight could break out at any moment. If I let this go on, they'd likely end up in another physical fight, hurling insults and completely ignoring me as they tore each other apart. Watching them like this could have been entertaining, but that wasn't the main point of my revenge. My real goal wasn't to turn Michael and Julia against each other. I had something much bigger in mind. If I let this continue, I wouldn't be able to achieve what I truly wanted. I believed that unless I saw this revenge through to the end, Luke would never rest in peace. This was why I had to finish this. And now, I was approaching the final act of this revenge story. All that was left was to deliver the final blow that would send them both into complete despair. Then I will be satisfied to let them go. To complete my plan, I opened my mouth and spoke. Sorry to interrupt your argument, but I'm thinking of getting a divorce. Both of them gasped in shock. Michael in particular looked absolutely stunned, his face draining of color.
Susan, you can't be serious. Tell me you're lying. If you leave me, I'll be all alone. Please, tell me this isn't true.
He pleaded, bowing his head in desperation. But unfortunately for him, I was entirely serious. I didn't know when it started, but the fact that Michael had betrayed me and had an affair with Julia was undeniable. If I had to consider whether I could continue living with him as his wife, the answer was a definite no. I wasn't that strong, and more importantly, my love for Michael had completely vanished the moment I found out about his affair. Long ago, I had already lost the will to stay married to him. But Michael, ignoring my feelings, kept apologizing, desperately trying to win back my favor. Watching him grovel like that made Julia chuckle.
Look at you. This is what happens when you try to pin everything on me. You're getting what you deserve.
Julia laughed at Michael. But it seemed she had misunderstood something. I never said that Michael would be the only one punished. And yet, Julia seemed to believe she'd walk away unscathed, which made me tilt my head in confusion. Julia, you'll also have to face the consequences for your actions.
What?
Julia cried out in shock at my words. Then, she collapsed to the floor, clinging to my feet.
We're family, right, Susan? How can you not forgive me? Haven't we worked together as a family all this time? Have you forgotten all we've been through?
Julia pleaded desperately. I couldn't understand a word of what she was saying. Since she married Luke and moved in with us, every day had been a nightmare. Julia never helped with the housework, lounging around all the time. And when I asked her to help, she accused me of bullying her as a mother-in-law. I didn't want to strain the relationship between her and Luke, so I kept quiet and did what I had to do. Yet now, Julia seemed to have conveniently forgotten all that and was acting as if we'd always gotten along. Her delusion made me say, "Huh?" out loud. Life with you was hell, Julia. You never helped with anything, always left everything to me, and when I asked you to do your part, you accused me of bullying you. In what world were we ever close? I always thought we had a terrible relationship." As I said this, Julia's face went pale. The idea that I would accept such a messy excuse and forgive her just because she thought we had gotten along well was so absurd that I couldn't help but let out yet another big sigh, one of many. Julia flinched at my sign, nervously watching me for any sign of anger. Both Luke and I had been betrayed by these two. I had wanted to believe in them. If possible, I had wanted to stay in the family forever. Even after Luke passed, I had hoped we could come together and support each other as family. But they shattered even that hope. What was left was a miserable ending. We had been betrayed and deceived by the two of them all along. It was especially tragic for Luke, who unknowingly entrusted his inheritance to Michael. I couldn't help but feel sorry for him. If he had known what Michael was doing, he never would have made such a foolish decision. If only I had realized it sooner, none of this would have happened. But it was too late now. Luke was gone. I will never forgive either of you. No matter what happens, you will get the punishment you deserve. Even if you cry and beg, I won't stop. I'll drag you both down to the depths of hell. So, be prepared. I won't let either of you escape." When I said that, they sat there stunned, as if they couldn't take my words. Their expressions were so ridiculous that I almost laughed, but staying in the same space as them was unbearable. I packed my things and left the house. Neither of them tried to stop me. My words must have shaken them to the core. After that, I divorced Michael. Then, I sued him for damages for his affair with Julia. Thanks to Luke's inheritance, Michael was able to pay the settlement quickly. But Julia was a different story. She didn't receive any part of the inheritance and had no one to turn to for help. There was no way she could pay the damages I demanded. Just as I expected, Julia started clinging to Michael after that. She would constantly try to contact him, demanding a share of the inheritance and causing a scene. Michael, overwhelmed by Julia's persistence, had become mentally exhausted. As for me, I moved to a new place and started living on my own. After years of living with Michael and Luke's family, it was a bit lonely, but I couldn't imagine living with those toxic people anymore. Surprisingly, living alone turned out to be quite peaceful. I no longer felt tied down and could enjoy each day at my own pace. Soon, I plan to visit Luke's grave to report what's happened. It'll take time before I can fully move on, but I'm determined to keep moving forward, one step at a time.